Hello and welcome to Heads Up, a year-long mental health awareness journey. Dartmouth Health's webinar series, which focuses on important mental health topics that affect all of us. I'm Audra Burns and I'm your moderator for this series. And today we are going to discuss the 5 signs of emotional suffering, how to recognize them, and what to do when you or someone you know is hurting emotionally. Now, I have 3 great panelists joining me for this topic, and we're so excited to have Dr. Julie Balaban. She is a section chief of child and adolescent psychiatry at Dartmouth Health Children. Hi, Julie.
Hi, Audra. Thanks so much for inviting me to be part of this.
We're thrilled to have you here, along with John Broderick Jr. He is the Senior Director of External Affairs of Dartmouth Health, and he's the former Chief Justice of the New Hampshire Supreme Court. And he's also the author of Back Roads and Highways, My Journey to Discovery of Mental Health. John, pleasure to have you joining us.
Audra, delighted to be with you.
And rounding out our panel is Dr. Barbara Van Dahlen, the founder of Campaign to Change Direction and the 5 Signs, a child psychologist and former executive director of Prevents, which is a presidential task force focused on creating a national response to suicide. And she is currently the CEO of WeBe, a technology platform for tracking and sharing emotional well-being. Wonderful to have you, Dr. Barbara Van Dahlen.
Thank you, Audra. It's great to be here.
We have a lot to get into, and just to give our viewers a concept of this project, the goal of this series is really to help change that conversation around mental health and to end the stigma associated with it. The Heads Up Mental Health Awareness series was actually inspired by John Broderick's work to end the stigma around mental health through his REACT campaign, which he has presented to tens of thousands of high school students and adults over the past 6 years. Now, REACT was created as a complement to the 5 Signs campaign that we're going to talk about, which was developed and launched by Barbara in 2015. So let's get right into it with you, Barbara. Please tell us, what inspired the 5 Signs campaign and what are the 5 signs?
Sure. So it's really exciting to have this conversation, to think back where we started in 2015 when the campaign launched initially, and then the great work that we got to do in New Hampshire because of John. So at the time, I was leading a national nonprofit organization called Give an Hour that provides free mental health care to service members, troops, and their families. And I had the great honor to work with then First Lady Michelle Obama through her effort at joining forces, which she launched with Dr. Jill Biden. So during that time, we were trying to think about how to move the needle on mental health and well-being, specifically for veterans and service members. And so the White House really was lovely in partnering and wanted us to think about what could that look like, because we know that stigma is a huge issue, especially for certain communities, veterans, service members, their families, for reasons obvious, I think, to our viewers. So I took a step back and started to think about, we need a public health campaign that's for everyone, not just for veterans, not just for service members, but rather for everyone. And we would have our veterans and service members be part of that conversation. So that's how it came about. It was literally an initiative through our partnership with the White House. First Lady Michelle Obama was our first keynote speaker. Dr. Biden, First Lady Michelle Obama, Richard Gere, Prince Harry, did an amazing job on a Jumbotron campaign that appeared in Times Square. So all of that led to working with John. But before we turn it over to, I know you're going to ask John about all of that, you asked what the 5 signs were. So we really wanted to create observable signs that would tell someone that either either I am suffering, something's not right, or somebody that I care about. We wanted 5 because we have 5 fingers and it's easy to count 5. And there are others, but these 5, if these 5 are going on, or if any of them are going on, it's time for us to do something, reach out to someone we care about. So the first one is really, is there a change in someone's basic personality? Are they not themselves? That's something you can observe in somebody that you know. It's something you can observe in yourself from your own baseline. The second is, do we see that the person is agitated? That could be anger, it could be anxiety, but that level of energy and agitation, and it's prolonged. It's not just for a few hours or, periodically, but something that tells us there is something again going on that is causing some kind of suffering or distress. The third is withdrawal. We're not saying that everyone needs to be an extrovert, but from whatever your baseline is, if you are no longer engaging in activities that you enjoy, if you're no longer able to engage in things like work and school, that's an important sign. Fourth one is self-care. Am I taking care of myself? Am I taking care of my hygiene? Am I eating properly? Am I sleeping well? Am I exercising? And the last one is hopelessness. When people feel hopeless, it is a really important indicator that they are suffering, they are hurting, and we need to do something. And they will let us know through their actions and their words. So those were the 5. And again, as we were building this, we wanted to get this out to as many different places as possible, as many different communities. And as the way of the world works, someone introduced me to John Broderick, and I had the pleasure of meeting John, and the rest is history. He brought us to New Hampshire, and here we are today.
And making great moves. And I love that you mentioned about moving the needle, because that's what it is. It's not going to be solved overnight, as we all know and we've all witnessed. It's taking those small steps to help with ending the stigma. And thank you for making it the 5, having it be simple and understandable. And for our viewers, we'll make sure that we link to the 5 signs in the video link below. And like you said, meeting John was wonderful for you. And it's been a privilege for me as well to work with John through our mental health awareness campaign. John, you first shared your family story through the campaign to change direction and the 5 signs, which led to the creation of React. Now, how does the React campaign complement the 5 signs, and why is it important for people to be aware of this?
First of all, I just want to say, Audra, that Dr. Van Dahlen, Barbara Van Dahlen, refocused my entire life. I don't say that lightly. She's an amazing person. And her 5 signs was so handy and understandable. Her goal was to make it as common and understood as a common signs for heart attack or stroke. I thought that was genius then. I think it's genius today. And so it's a tool to educate people on a topic most of us don't talk about. At Dartmouth Health, we complement it by saying, what do we do when we see or find those signs, and especially in others? And so I put that into practice. I've been to 350 schools, high schools, middle schools, spoken to 100,000 kids. I've had confided conversations with 3,000 or 4,000 young people. And I now know what they're telling me is real. And I always engage them. I always react to them. And that's something that we traditionally haven't done. Most of the time we ignore it or we pretend we don't see it. I see it every time I go out and speak. And so it's important to open a dialogue, however brief. It's important to let people know you hear them and see them and understand their suffering, and to be supportive of them and to encourage them where appropriate to get help, to talk to someone. It doesn't always have to be a psychiatrist. It can be a lot of different people. It could be a teacher, it could be a friend, it could be a parent. It's just important that we no longer accept silence as an answer. And I've hugged more kids and directed more kids to school counselors than I can count. I don't have the credentials of these 2 esteemed colleagues here today, but they've educated me on what people like me can do. It's important that we not ignore it and that we embrace the emotional suffering of others and support them.
And you've certainly been a road warrior over these past few years, and it's so exceptional to have you and Barbara on this same panel to just kind of come full circle of how your lives, kind of collided, and you've both set on this path to make a true change. And John, you've been going at it ever since, and we'll be sure John's been a previous guest on these webinar series. So we'll make sure for our viewers that we link to his previous conversations, which touched upon different topics on mental health, as well as his book, Backroads for the Highways, that he's been promoting. So we'll make sure that we have a link to that. So now let me turn to Julie. So Julie, why is it important for people, especially young people, parents, educators, coaches, like John said, a lot of different people can be involved in being aware. So why is it important for them to receive these messages about mental health and ending the stigma around speaking up when some of them they might know is struggling?
Thank you. And I just want to say it's also been my privilege to have a small degree of intersection with John and his work, which has really been amazing for this entire state. And I think his work has really highlighted the fact that there are so many children and students, teenagers, who are really suffering with and struggling with various kinds of stress and even to the degree of mental health problems. And so, of course, we don't want kids, we don't want anybody, but we especially don't want the children of our world to be suffering. So identifying problems and being able to intervene in them is extremely important. It's also very well documented that the earlier we can identify a problem and the earlier we can intervene, the better chance we have of both fixing the problem and also keeping that person on their normal developmental path. So Barbara was referring to withdrawal and isolation as one of the signs. And if you've got a teenager who's staying in their room the entire time and not participating in activities with friends, activities with families, they're really going to set their life off on a path that's going to be hard to come back from. So we want people to be aware of the signs and particularly not to be shy about that reaching out and connecting. It's never wrong to tell somebody that you're concerned about them. They may not take it well, or you may be incorrect. They may just be having a bad moment, but it's never a bad thing to do. And it can be really, really important to do that. And I think the other point I want to make is what John was saying about who to reach out to. We know that teens in particular can have tumultuous relationships with their parents. It's a normal part of adolescent development, individuation, identity formation. So it's particularly important for people at school, either peers or teachers, janitors, anybody who knows the kids well. And the kids are in school all day long. That's where they can really be observed for those changes that Barbara was talking about.
Well, thank you for that little nugget of information of that when we see something that might be concerning, it's always okay to express that concern to someone. I think that's so important, that early intervention and offering that concern so that things can be addressed. So thank you for that. Now I want to turn it back over to you, Barbara. Now, what, if any, changes have you observed in the general population and conversation around mental health since launching the 5 Signs?
That's a great question, Audra. And you know what Julie just said, I think that's one of the things that we're seeing is that the more we educate people, the more they understand that they have a role to play, the more we see people reaching out, bringing this to someone's attention, which is lovely. We see it, you know, we can, on another show, we can talk about social media and how it's a mixed bag, but you do see people supporting each other on social media and saying, you know, I'm so glad you shared that, or that took a lot of courage. That never used to happen. So we have made progress. We definitely are making progress. But something that I'm often asked about Change Direction and the other work I've done, why is progress so difficult in this area? Why is this so hard? You know, we need to keep doing the work. But there are some unique things about mental health challenges that are different than physical health challenges, unfortunately. You know, John and I used to talk about this a lot. You know, people never used to talk about cancer. They never used to say it out loud. You know, they would say cancer. But now people talk, there are support groups, there are runs, you know, all this great change. With mental health challenges and mental illness, it's not just that someone feels like they're ill, they feel defective. They really feel often like they are defective. And it's a higher bar to get over that, to share that and to be told, no, you're not defective. This is part of being human. Humans struggle in these ways. So So I've seen both the progress, and I think we're becoming better at trying to get messages out to address that. The other thing I'd say is this is both the good news and the bad news. We have had an explosion of interest. And because of that, there are more people trying to get into therapy. When I was a young therapist, the issue was the other way around. How could I build my practice? I don't know a therapist now who has any openings. They're really struggling to keep up with the demand. So that's a challenge. That's a positive that people are now seeking. We need to figure out how to respond. And the work that I'm doing today and that others are doing today is looking at things like how to use technology, not instead of, but in addition to. How can we deliver information? So there's a lot going on in this space. We still have a tremendous amount of work to do.
There certainly is, but having you and John and Julie as experts and kind of in this field helping, we're starting to chip away at it. And I think, like you said, having people be more comfortable talking about it publicly, maybe it's the opportunity for, maybe our viewers, if they can be having the conversation where, I would like to talk to someone who, do you talk to someone, or are you using a new app? Is there, starting that conversation to kind of make it more normal? Because, we ask our friends all the time for recommendations on restaurants or local gyms. Like, let's have recommendations on what support system that you're using. I think that would be a great change that we're having. So
absolutely.
Let me turn over to John now. So your book that you recently wrote is about your experience speaking with students and others about mental health over the past several years. So what are the three most prevalent concerns? I know it's hard to narrow it down to just three, but if you would have to just share with us the three most prevalent concerns that you've heard or have observed over time, what would those be?
Well, I'll tell you, it has been life transforming for me, Audra. I wish everyone listening today could be with me at my elbow in those gyms and auditoriums. Let me say, I love this generation of kids. They are amazing. I mean that. And they're the least judgmental generation of Americans in our history. The one thing I love about them, it's kind of going back to what Barbara said, is the conversation is starting. And among young people, as young as the sixth grade through high school, they talk to each other now in a way that would have been unbelievable when I was their age. But what I've seen and what I want to leave people with is this. Even though these kids are much more open to one another, people need to understand that anxiety and depression are epidemic among young people in America. Kids have the problems. The kids are not the problem. It's not that they're defective. That's the old view of mental health. It's a health issue, but there's a lot of anxiety and depression. The other thing I've been left with is that if you are vulnerable, as I am when I talk about my own family's journey, in front of kids, they will return the favor. So they open up to me, Audra, for a very simple reason. They know when I finish speaking that I won't judge them or shame them or blame them. It doesn't take a whole lot more than that. And the last thing I've learned is that they want someone to be on their team. And those who do this work clinically know that having one trusted adult in your life, hopefully it's a parent, but if it's not, maybe it's a coach or a teacher, could even be a friend. One trusted adult with whom they can confide. Those are things that I think are real, and those are the impressions that I've been left with. A lot of progress has been made, as Barbara was saying. A lot more progress needs to be made.
I remember attending one of your presentations, and I think what was so powerful that it seemed like the kids, like you said, they opened up to you, and it was almost, it seemed like because you were the first respected person in their life that might have been very candid about what mental health and how it impacted you and your family, and you normalized it for them. And it was the chance where they're in the audience watching you thinking like, he's talking about something that I didn't know I could talk about. And I remember them coming up to you and hugging you and talking to you. And it was just, it's so powerful. So hopefully our viewers will take their own opportunity to share their personal stories, because we don't know how it will impact other people. So, and as well, you mentioned your book again, the Back Roads and Highways, My Journey to Discovery on Mental Health. For our viewers, we'll be sure to link to that at the bottom of this video so you all can learn more about John's book. So before we wrap up, I just want to mention or get something from all of you, a key takeaway from this conversation. What do we want to leave our viewers with? Barbara, I'm going to start with you.
So I would say that people often feel helpless in these situations when they're concerned about somebody that they love. They don't know what to do. And I want people to feel hopeful. We have come a long way. There's a tremendous amount of information available. There are resources. You can't always get to a therapist, but there may be other tools. The work that we're doing through WeBe is all about that, harnessing the power of we. So I want people to feel that no matter what they might be worried about, taking that step to say, I see you, I care about you, I want to be of help. How can I be of help to you? And sometimes people will ask me, what if they say, get out of my face, I don't want your help? Then you come back again, or you get other friends or family members. Don't give up, because that's their fear or their anger, their defensiveness talking. Like John said, we all want somebody there with us to help us. We do.
We certainly do. And John, what parting thoughts do you have for us?
Sure. My sense of 6 years of high school gyms and talking to thousands of kids in confided ways is that we need to normalize and demythologize this whole area. Emotional suffering affects so many people, 1 in 5 adolescents, 1 in 5 adults. And sometimes, in my limited capacity, just listening and validating and supporting and occasionally hugging. Hugs go a long way, Audra, with kids and adults too. They just know when you hug them or they hug you that they've made a connection, and they're not ashamed of that.
And you've certainly been that person who's been available for people. So I wish you the best on your continued journey that you're on. And Julie, let me turn to you for your final thoughts.
I think really just building on what both John and Barbara said, be active, that is, pay attention and be aware of what's going on with the people around you. Be brave enough to take that step to reach out to them, but also don't feel like you're responsible for fixing them. So students and children in particular, that's where another role for the trusted adult in life is, if you have a concern about somebody, is to bring it to a trusted adult who can really be perhaps more helpful in making things go in the right direction. And then I think just what I had said earlier about the earlier, the better. It's even been shown that just helping somebody to express how they're feeling and identifying it and validating it, that alone helps people to get better.
And like John said, there's 1 in 5 that's impacted. So we all can do our part to help ourselves and help those that we love to know the 5 signs. So thank you, Dr. Van Dahlen, John, and Dr. Balaban. Thank you so much for joining me today for this very important conversation.
Thank
Thank
you.
you so much. It's been great.
Now, to view past Heads Up segments, we're going to link to our site at the bottom of this video. And remember, like Barbara said, we want to be hopeful and not helpless. So please take a moment to know the 5 signs and be aware of them. Thank you all for watching. Stay healthy and stay safe. Take care.
Bye.